In December 2010, we released the most recent major report on climate change and food security from IFPRI. The research actually began the year before when we released a report that talked about the consequences of climate change for agriculture and the costs of dealing with that. In that report, which we released in October of 2009, we found that unimpeded climate change would have significant negative effects on agriculture and on human well-being. Our estimates at that time were just the cost of climate change would increase the number of malnourished children by some 25%. That's a huge increase, and that's even only the tip of the iceberg in terms of the human suffering that would come from climate change. But last year, in 2010, then we wanted to address the question of how big is the climate change effect in terms of the larger challenges facing us, in this case us being humans, from food security. It's fairly widely understood that there will be more people in the world. We're looking for an increase in population between 2000 and 2050 of roughly 50%. So for every person in a room today, there will be 1.5 people in 2050, and that extra half a person needs to be fed somehow. And that half a person will be located, for the most part, in developing countries, in what we call the developing countries today at least. We hope that between now and then, many more people in those parts of the world will see substantial increases in income. So the increase in the number of people and in the increase in income will mean that there will be substantially greater demand for food, both in quantity terms, just a volume measure, but also in terms of quality. So as people's income rise, they'll switch from eating more staples to more fruits and vegetables and meat and oils, and those things require more inputs into the agricultural sector. We're already stressed in terms of water availability. We're running into limits on land availability, and so the question of where we're going to meet that demand in the world is a huge challenge. And then climate change comes along on top of that. You can think of climate change as a threat multiplier. It makes the challenges from those food security pressures that much greater. So in the monograph, some key findings. First of all, the finding from the previous year was, and reiterated again this year, that there would be substantial increases in prices for commodities. For maize, our baseline net price increases on the order of 100% between 2010 and 2050, with a range of between 88 and 130% depending upon the kind of climate change outcomes that we have. We did a variety of scenarios. Now, contrast that result with the effect of growing demand and growing productivity in the agricultural sector in the 20th century. Over the 20th century, we saw substantial declines in agricultural prices in real terms, which contributed to the enormous increase in human well-being during that century. But in the 21st century, that trend of declining prices is reversed. We're going to see continued increases in prices, and our results were considered by many initially to be pessimistic, but just last week the OECD and the Food and Agriculture Organization released a report that essentially supported our results of increased prices. So those price increases then get translated into more malnourished children in the 21st century. And then the question is, will the income increases that are coming compensate for the higher prices? And the answer, of course, is a complicated one. In some parts of the world, we anticipate enough increase in income to offset the price increases that would come out of increased population and increased incomes. But the challenge of climate change reduces that good news in terms of the number of malnourished children. So the bottom line here is that we, again, the human species, face a large challenge going forward in time. With investments in productivity, with investments in improved government programs, railroads, for example, in agriculture, improvements in irrigation systems around the world so that we get higher water efficiency, and improvements in the way farmers use inputs. In some places reducing the amount of inputs they use, in other places increasing them. Our collective estimate at the moment is that we can manage to 2050 if we do all the right things and we start now. the challenge facing us beyond 2050 becomes increasingly great unless we do something about greenhouse gas emissions.